To another painting tutorial. This one we're going to look at the Godsworn Hunt, and these I've done in a theme of Gem and the Holograms from the 80s cartoon. So I thought I'd do them nice and colorful, and let's see how this turns out. So first off, I did some airbrushing with Bugman's Glow. You can see I did a spray paint base coat there with sort of a medium brown. Doesn't really matter what color you start with, but just trying to, I figured there's a lot of skin on these guys, so I'm going to try to put down a layer with the airbrush. And then just doing some highlighting here with Kadayan Flesh Tone. A lot of the skin that I airbrush here doesn't really pass through all the layers. I mean, all the work I did later, I kind of redo it all. But just kind of giving me a base coat so it's easier to touch it up later. Going on with a bit of Kislev Flesh for some highlights. Again, I retouch this up later just because I do a lot of other stuff on these guys. But just trying to get an idea of what the skin's going to look like. So for the Gem and the Holograms, there's lots of pinks and purples and blues. So starting out with some Screamer Pink here, base coating anything that I think is going to be pink. These guys took a little longer than usual just because there's so many different colors. Normally when I do a warband for Underworlds, the palette is much more limited, but with this one here with the theme, trying to get everything to look right. Bit of Nagaroth Night for the base coat of the blue here. Purple, not blue. Teclis Blue for the base coat of blue. You can see this nice bright blue. Goes on nice on that medium brown. So I'm trying to pick all the colors that kind of fit with these guys, block them all in with the base colors, just so that I know that I'm not going to have to go back and retouch things up. So Celestra Gray for the parts that are going to be sort of whitish, which is her cape, and a bunch of other details on all the guys. If you're looking actually for guides, you know, better to check out my blog for some still images. You can see which colors I did here. All the highlighting and stuff isn't super technical. Just kind of going with the typical triads with Citadel, and it's more about which colors I pick to go where is kind of important for this warband. Anyways, lead belcher on some of the metal bits, like shoulder pads and whatnot. Going on with Pink Horror now, starting some highlighting. Basically covering everything with this because I want it to be a much brighter pink than I started out with. And at this point all the guys are blocked out. Still haven't figured out what to do with the bases, and I'll show you that later though. Anyways, just trying to layer up the Pink Horror here. A little thin on that cape there. Some Screaming Bell, so I figured I'd do a bit more metal bits here, a different metal color, so I went with Screaming Bell, kind of a reddish color. I think it turned out nicely, so not too much of it on the guys, mostly just those two on the weapons. At this point I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the skulls and the bases, so I base coated them in Zandri Dust. I end up changing this with airbrushing them a lighter color and then doing the Nalakai oxide sort of color. Same with these runes that they all have. They all seem to have the same thing. I did it with gray, but decided to change that later. Okay, so for the guy who has the darker skin, I'm using Reaper Dark Shadow. Reaper have a really nice range of paints. There's maybe 9 different skin tones they have. They all kind of blend into each other. So the Dark Shadow is the sort of darkest color, and then you work your way up there. There's a tanned skin, and then there's like a pale skin that you can work all the way up. So I like those. It gives me lots of options for skin tones. You can do like a dark skin, you can do a brown skin, you can do a olive, all that sort of thing, or really pale. Going through with a thin down wash of blue on all of the blue bits, just to give it a bit more shade, but it's thinned down sort of 50-50 with the medium, just so that it doesn't overpower anything. So it did the blue and the grays with this blue shadow. So to give the grays, which are going to be white, sort of a bluish white. Bit of crimson. There's not a lot of red. I think there's only 2 or 3 red things on these guys. And now with the violet, again, thinned down so it doesn't go overly harsh on things. You see I'm using a giant brush. Not too worried about overpainting on things because the washes kind of flow in. Little Reichland flesh shade on the flesh. And I probably overdid this a bit. Should have thinned it down more or just worked in some glazes with the darker colors, but I go back over all the skin later. Okay, dark skin. So this is the next layer up from the dark shadow on the Reaper Triad range, and just working on all the raised bits of flesh here. I find that the Reaper ones, the difference between each of them is so fine that you don't have to worry too much about blending. The tones are pretty close to each other, so they kind of almost blend themselves. Okay, got a bit of white here, working on the eyes. So for the eyes, what I do is I sort of paint in a big white blotch, paint in the pupil with Rhinox hide, which is more like sort of the iris and the pupil, and then go back and touch up the skin all around it. And you can see here, you sort of paint back the skin towards the eyelids. Okay, so here's the bases that the inspiration I used. You can see it's sort of a misty base there. So I'm doing this with all of the airbrush, and it was kind of an experiment, and I liked how it turned out. So I kept it. Anyways, basically using different purples and blues and whites to sort of do sort of lines, almost like a tiger stripe, but very, very faint edges on them. Going with the blue here, so just sort of going back and forth between colors, like stripy bits on a random pattern. And you can see that the light blue goes on really light with the airbrush, so you don't really need to base coat it with anything darker to get that on. Okay, going back with a bit more purple. Figured that the purple needed to be a little bit darker. Just wanted to get a bit more variation there. So I got pink, purple, and blue now. And yeah, I think it starting to look nice. But the real trick here is going along with white and sort of edging each of those different color bands with that. And that really helped out. And then I do more detail later, and you'll see that, but this is sort of getting me pretty close to where I want to be with these, and pretty happy with how it's turning out at this point. And you see I did a bit of white on the skulls that the guys have, and so anything that was skulls on these guys, I did sort of a white base coat with the airbrush, and then the Nalkai oxide layer over top of it, and give me a nice sort of a greenish color. You see I did all the little bird skulls that they have on them that way as well. And then any of the mossy bits I did with a green glaze, and you see the bases are done. So really happy with how that turned out. Oh, sorry, not done. Use a bit of light washes here just to help get a bit more definition on some of the shadows there. So thin down the washes on each of the colors and dialed that in a bit. Just helps give it a bit more depth. The airbrush flattens things quite a bit. Okay, and then a white scar dry brush on everything. That's just to bring out the raised bits again after those washes dry. And to give it a bit more pastel-y kind of a look now that it's all done. And a black rim. I don't normally do black rims on my bases. I usually do a Steel Legion brown. But figure for these ones, with the bright colors on the bases, the black edging would be nice. Okay, so using dark highlight on this guy here. Trying to bring out all the highlights on him. And the next one up is Tan Shadow. So that's slightly lighter than the dark highlight. So there's three ranges. There's the dark skin, there's the tan skin, and then there's light skin. And each of them has a shadow, a medium, and a highlight. So using tan skin here to go back in some of the shadows and sort of bring out some definition there. Actually, no, sorry, I'm not doing shadows. I'm doing more of the highlights here. You see bringing out the muscle definition. Going back with dark highlight and shading things a little bit, sort of around where the skin meets the clothing and any of the muscles there. So doing a shade painted on, kind of going back over my tan skin color. Okay, so now highlighting up all of the blue bits with Lothran blue. You see these guys are getting pretty close, just have to highlight up all of these different colors that I did. Bringing up the grays to a nice brighter celestial gray, and then it'll be highlighted up to white almost. Actually, it will be highlighted up to white, but it'll still stay pretty gray. Purple highlights, so this is the medium highlight here. So for medium highlight, I'm trying to cover most of the stuff except for the recesses, especially because I'm trying to get these guys really bright. Pink horror highlight on all the pink bits. Bit more work with the gray, trying to bring that up to almost a white now. Now some more pink highlights. So just trying to catch the edges of all the pink bits here. And I want the pink to be pretty bright, so I probably shouldn't have started as dark. Might have turned out a little nicer. Gene still a purple highlights now and everything. It's purple. And then some more purple highlights there on the hair. And using some of the edge paints to get some nice bright highlights. You can also mix a bit of Pallid Witch Flesh with whatever your highest highlight was, and do some of your edges with that, if you don't want to buy all those edge highlights for not using that much. Bit of Ushabti bone on the claws of this guy. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the bone, so I just stuck with a regular bone. And Screaming Skull edge highlights on that. And then basically we're done. So some final Agrax Earthshade on those bony bits, which are the teeth and claws. And also going around some of the bits, the flesh, just around where they transition to different pieces of metal or whatnot. I did highlight the metal. I don't think I showed that. Did a bit of dry brushing and edge highlighting. Anyways, here's the picture, the still pictures. These will all be up on my blog. It's like watchingpaintdry.blogspot.com. The link in the description below. Anyways, if you have any comments, let me know. If you have any suggestions for future war bands that I haven't painted up already for Underworlds, I'm really enjoying doing those. And hope you enjoyed this, and see you next time.